I'm Eric Feinberg, Chief Marketing Officer here at Essential Accessibility. My entire professional career has been focused on helping to ensure great customer experience for all people in the world. Personally, I'm a fan of open and honest communication between people and between companies and people. And this webinar speaks to both impressively. We know how valuable your time is, and that's why we've made the decision to keep this and all of our webinars to 30 minutes. Let's meet our main presenter. Simon Dermer is Essential Accessibility's CEO and co-founder. Simon is responsible for driving the mission, vision, and strategic direction for the company. He is passionate about bridging the digital divide for people with disabilities. And so once again, a big thank you to you all who have joined us today for our live webinar. And so let's get to it. Welcome to the party, Simon.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Today, we're going to delve into the 4 steps to crafting the perfect accessibility statement. As a leading digital accessibility solutions provider that works with hundreds of leading brands around the world, we see quite a number of statements in various formats in various jurisdictions. And we have a lot of experience advising brands on finding their voice and giving expression to their commitment to the accessibility agenda. So we're going to use all that to inform you all today and hopefully send you on your way, getting you on the path to doing it well yourselves. So first of all, let's just start off with a good old-fashioned definition. We've lifted from the W3C, and I'll read it out. Accessibility statement relays your internal organizational policies and your accessibility goals and your successes when it comes to serving and working with people who have disabilities. So to put that into more user-friendly terms, what is it really about? Well, number one, you want your accessibility statement to truly reflect your company's or organization's deeds, your commitment, and what you're actually doing in the realm of accessibility. Second of all, you'd like to show and demonstrate that you actually care about the needs of people with disabilities, the 1 in 5 individuals around the world who self-identify as having a disability. And finally, you want to give specific information on what exactly your organization is doing in particular to address and meet these needs. Ultimately, what the accessibility statement is all about, it's about building trust. The theme of building trust is gaining greater currency nowadays, and we're seeing it in all facets of organizations, whether it's from data security through to brand image. And accessibility maps to that and parallels it in many different ways. So if you look at, for example, privacy policies, the ubiquitousness of privacy policies now is converging with the prevalence of accessibility statements as one more way for organizations to articulate and build trust. Equal opportunity statements are increasingly pervasive, where the organization is signaling what their commitment to and respect for obligations under various laws and jurisdictions, and to convey their diversity and inclusion mandates. The obvious one, it's the right thing to do. If you want to build trust, you want to connect with, again, the 1 in 5 individuals who self-identify as having a disability. This maps directly to business impact and the goodness that your brand and organization is endeavoring to deliver. Finally, you want to build trust in a non-legalese, brand-building manner. You want this to be readable. You want it to be reflective of your brand. You want to project that disability-friendly brand image. The last thing you want to do is come across as conveying boilerplate legalese that no one is interested in reading.
When you have a website that's not accessible to people with disabilities, you're basically hanging a sign outside the door that says your business is not welcome here.
Well, you heard it from me, and now you heard it from our good friend Mark, who also happens to be blind. Ultimately, that's the most compelling reason to offer an accessibility statement, because it's about people. So let's give you some feedback from the field and some of the objections that we commonly hear when we're speaking to organizations and various functional areas that are giving consideration to articulate an accessibility statement. A common objection we'll hear is that, well, there's no ROI. Well, the answer to that is measuring ROI on trust. It's not an easy thing, and I'm not aware of any tool out there that gives you an accurate assessment of that value. But nevertheless, if you believe in the importance of building trust, then that's an objection that doesn't really stand or hold water. We've already talked about legalese and the ineffectualness of articulating a statement that's written more for another lawyer rather than for a stakeholder that your organization is serving. A common refrain that's often heard is that, well, my organization is not selling to the government, or we're not in higher education, where there's a lot of awareness, increasing awareness of the importance of accessibility. And our answer to that is, it doesn't matter what sector you're in. An accessibility statement is critical because people with disabilities comprise populations in every sector, in every organization, in every population. So that's not a good reason not to pursue an accessibility statement or to draft an articulate post. Another common refrain is that the organization is leveraging third-party applications. So it's kind of a buck passing attitude that, what do you want me to do? I'm procuring technologies in the open market. Well, what you're going to want to endeavor to do is to demonstrate and to wholeheartedly commit to ensuring that you're making best efforts to at least procure technologies that are meeting requirements, accessibility requirements, and that you are conveying the importance of these requirements to your vendor partners, because as their corporate customers, you're in a position to affect change in that regard and stress the importance of these obligations to ultimately to the segments, populations, people you serve as an organization. And finally, a common one we often hear is that, well, our website is not very accessible. I don't really want to put a statement up because we want to draw attention to that fact. Well, this is refuted and addressed in several ways. First of all, by putting up a statement, as we're going to demonstrate in this presentation, it's going to articulate your commitment and show you're on the path. So it's going to demonstrate sensitivity to the needs and that you're doing something about the fact that you're not accessible. Second of all, it's critical that you understand anybody who's going to encounter your site and face the barriers because of its inaccessibility is already going to be aware that your site is not accessible. The fact that you have a statement is not going to shine any light on anything that someone with a disability who's having trouble accessing the content in your site is not already going to be aware of. So it's a non-starter. All right then, hitting this from another angle, who is the statement for? Well, ultimately, the statement is for everyone, because all your various groups, whether it could be your digital inclusion team, you're going to want to articulate your organization's commitment to remind everyone in the organization of it. And so it's reflected and imbued into your organization's culture and values. You're going to want to do this to signal to your customers this commitment. You're going to want to do it from a diversity and inclusion standpoint, in the context of job applicants, signaling that you are an employer that can be trusted, that is not just giving short shrift to the disability agenda through boilerplate legalese language, but that you are sincerely committed to creating a welcoming environment, an accommodating one for all potential job seekers, including people with disabilities and people of all abilities. Your vendors, you want to signal this to the organizations, whether it's suppliers, technology providers, again, articulating that commitment and enacting it in broad and bright lights right on your key digital properties. Investors, regulators, press, and various other stakeholders. Added benefits of an accessibility statement. Well, some of you may already be aware, or have had encounters with trolls, drive-by litigants, secondary gain seekers, and so-called ambulance chasers who are launching legal claims about organizations, against organizations, not with necessarily with the best of intent, but more to profit from these your unfortunate circumstances. So at least by articulating a statement to these audiences, they'll know that you understand the severity and that they shouldn't waste their time with you because you're actually taking proactive measures to do something about it. So here's an example of a stellar accessibility statement. And why I'm showing this to you is that we want you to see that this comes across as very plain vanilla. We know that, but the power of the statement is not in the visual presentation so much as it's in the words. And we encourage you to study this statement as an example of best practices. And afterwards, when in your own time, you look at the materials and develop an appreciation for some of the things that make it a great statement that we're going to get to further on in this webinar today. But reporting back from the field, we'd like to give you some insight into what we encounter as a digital accessibility solution provider in our experiences working with organizations and coming across organizations that we don't work with, and to report back to you some of the findings from what's going on out there to help inform, justify, and validate the reasons for embracing the importance and necessity of crafting an accessibility statement. So the study I'm about to show you, we presented earlier this year at a leading disability technology conference called CSUN, and it's based on the quality and prevalence of accessibility statements in the marketplace, ultimately that have been evaluated from a truthfulness standpoint. What we did is we selected 3 key industries: banking, healthcare, and retail, and we basically took a sample of the top 10 in each of these respective industrial sectors. And what we then proceeded to do is to evaluate on a low intensity level the level of accessibility of their sites for comparable purposes. And for those of you of a more of a technical bent, here's the methodology we followed. And we used to classify the sample effectively into three buckets. First of all, what we did is we took all the organizations that didn't have an accessibility statement, we tallied them up. Second, we tallied up all the ones that had what we're calling a generic accessibility statement. Very, very, very routine, non-specific statement that looked like they're very prevalent. They look like they've been copied and pasted from various sites, and it's a generic statement in the sense that not a lot of thought has gone into it, and it really hasn't been personalized or customized for the organization that's posting it. Finally, we looked at organizations that had crafted very specific sites detailing exactly what their commitment is, what they are doing, potentially articulating timelines, methodologies, which really signaled that they were taking this issue very, very seriously, and that resources had been assembled and been deployed, marshaled in the service of crafting a statement and ultimately achieving accessibility for their digital properties. And these three buckets, we took the 3 industrial sectors times 10 sites, 10 organizations in each sector, so 30 sites total, and we tallied it up. And here's what we discovered. Well, of the 30 sites, 37% did not have a statement. 4 out of 30 did have a statement, and the remaining 50% had a specific statement. In other words, a very carefully crafted statement. And so in examining the truthfulness claim, which is ultimately what we were doing here with this methodology, we wanted to determine, do the statements reflect on some level the level of accessibility of the site? And what we found was, as you can see here, Sites that had no accessibility statement were not as accessible as the ones that had a generic one, which were not as good as the ones that ultimately had a specific accessibility statement. Stated in another way, organizations that had taken the time to craft a proper accessibility statement, ultimately their deeds were assessed and measured as they were the ones that had achieved the highest level of accessibility of the group. Generic statement providers second, and of course, the worst sites were the ones that came from the organizations that didn't have a statement. So ultimately, we've discovered the more specific the statement, the more accessible the site. So there is a high degree of truthfulness in the marketplace. And the rankings here you're seeing reflect the fact that banking had the highest level of accessibility, followed by healthcare, and retail came in third. So communicating all that gives you some insight into
Hey, Simon, this is Eric here again. I was thinking maybe we should do a poll here. So we're going to bring up a poll here to showcase that very concept that your CSUN analysis did, which is what type of accessibility do you have, those folks that are on the webinar today? And we're going to share the results instantly here, but the question is, what type of accessibility statement do you have? We'll leave this up for about 20 seconds. Do you have none? Like, I have no accessibility statement. You have a generic one, which is, yeah, you've got one, but it's of generic, descent. And then the specific one is that it's specific, it's cognizant of the laws surrounding the accessibility. So let's wait just about 10 more seconds. It looks like we're getting a lot of good data in here. Oh my God, I think you're going to be fascinated by the results since we're seeing this in real time here. All right, I think we are getting a few last entrants and we're showing the results here. Well, how about that? Look how many don't have an accessibility statement. I guess that means that's why they're here, to learn how to make a perfect accessibility statement from you. So Simon, I'm going to hand it back to you, but it's just very interesting to see the poll results. 59% of the people do not have an accessibility statement. 26% have a generic one, and only 15% have a specific one. And so that just shows us the variance of the audience that's on the line here, and also how helpful probably these 4 steps are going to be to you. So let's continue.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. Okay. Here's another example. Fantastic accessibility statement. Callaway Golf ticks all the right boxes, addresses all the key requirements, gives beautiful expression to where they are on the path and where it is they're going. Against the backdrop of an accessibility statement, you can take things to an even higher degree by, in a layman-friendly manner, spotlighting all the attributes of your brand, all the key products and services that appeal to the consumers and employees with disabilities segment, like job opportunities, products, and anything else that a brand is doing that is of particular relevance to this segment. So here's an example with what Merck is doing against the backdrop of the statement. All right, you're on this webinar today to learn the four key steps to achieving the perfect statement. So step number 1, be authentic. That is critical. Just be honest, be authentic, and truthfully reflect what is going on, where you're at, and where you're going. When you look at the Melissa and Doug statement we had introduced earlier, and you look at the way they were given expression to their commitment, just as we are committed to making products that inspire imagination and encourage kids to see new possibilities, we are committed to making our digital experiences accessible to all. That's genuine. That's from the heart, and that reflects the brand. And you look at this statement, the sincerity is reflected in the fact that you can email them directly, you can give them feedback, and ultimately engage with the brand. You want to be accurate. That's why it's very, very critical that when you make a truth value claim, that it's backed up and it's been validated. You don't want to do it whimsically or willy-nilly. So specifically as well, when you look at the guidelines or the laws or that apply to your particular sector, jurisdiction, again, what you aspire to from a standards level, from a WCAG level, you want to be sure that what you're giving expression to is understood and has been communicated and disseminated across the organization, and it's truthful. In speaking your truth, you just got to find your voice, be sincere about it, and talk about the genuine stuff you're doing. You saw the Merck example, spotlighting what they're doing. Here's examples of people that are our friends giving sincere when we're talking about our brand, what their opinions and their feedback is. Find your voice, give expression to it, map it to your accessibility statement in this very much in a disability context.
I'm just going to go back one time in the chat box. That's why it's so helpful. Would you mind, somebody in the chat box who's using the screen reader was asking me, because you had read that one line, which was so helpful. Could you read just the first two paragraphs because they're on a screen reader and the card provider?
Sure. My pleasure. Yeah. Okay. Melissa and Doug accessibility statement. At Melissa and Doug, we believe in wholesome and healthy hands-on play, and we feel it's our responsibility to make open-ended play accessible to everyone. Just as we are committed to making products that inspire imagination and encourage kids to seek new possibilities, we are committed to making our digital experiences accessible to all. We are working deliberately and diligently on making our websites accessible and making every effort to conform to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA. To accomplish this, we have partnered with Essential Accessibility and built a diverse team of individuals who are trained in digital accessibility and ADA compliance so we can continuously improve our site. We provide access to an assistive technology app for consumers who have trouble typing, gesturing, moving a mouse, or reading. The application is free to download and incorporates an array of tools that address keyboard replacement.
Okay, I think that's good. I think the question was, I wanted to get a sense for the combination. In the Q&A, they were asking about the combination between the legalese and actually having the laws in there, which you spoke to, I think, perfectly, and the branding and how this statement, as you were saying before, has both of those kind of linked together really nicely. There's one more paragraph, which is a little bit more about how to contact us with phone, email, and help center information. But I think we can move on. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you for the question. All right, speak your truth. We've talked about, and finally, you want to secure the resources, get the expertise you need to ensure that you're able to achieve and maintain the level of compliance at minimum that's required, and ultimately, hopefully, to enhance the customer experience and go beyond compliance to ensure that nobody with any disability is left behind. Essential Accessibility, we're a social enterprise. We deliver accessibility as a service. It's what we do, and it's the right thing to do. We work with hundreds of brands around the world, familiar names. And we also happen to have inaugurated the Disability in Advertising Awards with the Association of National Advertisers, all with the view to encouraging brands to factor in and incorporate people with disabilities in portrayals in the marketing, advertising, and other media outlets. Our accessibility as a service comprises several key pillars that all inform accessibility program management. We work on compliance software, audits, assistive technology. We train, brand purpose, risk mitigation. These are all the pillars of a comprehensive program to address all of your needs in various facets. Finally, you're going to walk away, and like anyone, you're not going to be able to remember everything. So I want you to have 3 key takeaways in mind as you go back to your day-to-day activities. Number 1, assess where you're at honestly, independently, and verify it with a third party. If you don't have the resources to do that objectively, then it's critical you have someone impartial do it to determine where you are honestly at. Second of all, commit to what it is you're going to do and stick to that commitment. Ultimately, you need to convey that, disseminate it to everyone in the organization, to imbue it into the corporate DNA, which is why you've got to articulate it. Create the perfect statement that reflects this, and you're going to be on your path to achieving it, maintaining it, and full digital inclusion, so no one is left behind.
Amazing stuff, Simon. Thank you so much. We actually have had quite a few questions come in, so I'm going to transition directly to the Q&A. Sound good?
Okay.
So the first question is, actually, I love this question. Who needs to be involved in the creation of, I mean, you've talked to everybody about the 4 steps to create one. This is a great question. Who needs to be involved in the creation of the accessibility statement?
Well, there are several key functional areas. I think every organization doesn't necessarily have them, but the general rule is it's good to involve multiple areas. Critical areas you'd want to involve, could be communications, if you have a communications department, marketing, HR, diversity, inclusion, compliance, if you have a compliance department, and or legal. If the chief digital officer, if you're doing it all in-house, is going to need to be involved, because they're going to be directly implementing what's being articulated in the policy. So quite often the CDO will lead the charge, but that gives you an idea of it. This is not something that should be written in a dark corner by one person and then just popped up on the site. You're going to need the involvement of a number of folks from minimal number of key areas.
Perfect. Thank you. I think this is actually a natural extension question. This one came in after that. So it was, how frequently do I need to update my accessibility statement?
Okay, well, let's answer that. Basically, that's going to be a function of several things. Your dev cycle, the frequency with which you're making updates and changes being affected. It's going to be a function of changing regulations and laws, and it's also going to be a function of your changing commitment and reflecting what it is that's been achieved. So that is going to be different for every organization, and it's going to be a function of those variables.
Good stuff. And then we have, I think we probably have time for one more one. This is from somebody on the webinar, Stacy Short. Thank you, Stacy. Can you talk about where to include an accessibility statement in digital training? So when you're doing it, do you include it in like a learning management system? Do you do it at the beginning or the end of like how to do a good website for a particular company? Where does accessibility fall from when you're training somebody up on it?
On a standard developer,
yeah.
Where does the statement fall within the accessibility training? Or is
it?
I don't know what the scientific answer based on empirical findings would be to that, but I wouldn't be shy about leading with that, because quite often people don't know anything about accessibility. The first thing they're going to hear about or discover is accessibility statements through their own common experiences. So by starting with the familiar and then generalizing, going to the specific in you're kind of making, you're going from the general to the specific. It'll provide the context of what's out there in the field, and it maps it back to what competitors are doing and gets that buy-in and interest level from people who are working on the dev team.
That seems to make a lot of sense too, because the accessibility statement is what people will see and present, but with the content of the accessibility statement and what people are actually doing to make their websites accessible, it's like the flash and the substance. You can tell people about it, but you have to have the substance to do it. That makes a lot of sense. Well, given time, Simon, I just want to say a big thank you to you, and thank you to everyone for joining us today for our live webinar. As a reminder, this webinar has been recorded and will be shared out with all of our registrants in the next few days. We'll send an email with follow-up instructions on how to watch the fully accessible replay. If you have any questions, please email Simon directly. His email address is on the screen here, or you can email the greater team at learn@essentialaccessibility.com. As a closing statement, I will just say this. Accessibility statements are reflective of your brand. Simon taught us that today. We hope our webinar today, the 4 steps to the perfect accessibility statement, helped you. We at Essential Accessibility love what we do, and we are beautifully practiced at developing accessibility statements for our clients as part of a full accessibility program. And we'd love to help you on your way. So email us. Have a great day. Thank you all for attending the webinar.
Thank you.